Hello and welcome to News live from Islamabad. I'm Javad Tehami and these are the headlines. Iran's President-elect Ebrahim Raisi says the country's foreign policy will not be limited to the 2015 nuclear deal. Addressing his first news conference, Raisi urged the U.S. to immediately return to the 2015 nuclear deal and lift all sanctions on Iran. He added that the country's ballistic missile program is not negotiable. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says he's against nuclear weapons, but the country's nuclear program is only for defense. In an interview with HBO, Khan said the United States must make a political settlement before withdrawing from Afghanistan. He also questioned the international community's silence on human rights violations in Indian-occupied Kashmir. On Islamophobia, Khan said there is no connection between Islam and terrorism. Indian troops have martyred 3 civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Baramulla district. The youths were targeted during a so-called search operation in Sopore town of the district. The occupying troops have martyred nearly 370 Kashmiris since the revocation of the valley's special status in 2019. The US and the EU have imposed curbs on a number of Belarusian individuals and entities over human rights abuses and the forced landing of an airliner last month. The sanctions include assets freeze of those blacklisted, while EU citizens and companies have been barred from doing business with them. India has reported over 53,000 new COVID-19 cases, with more than 1,400 deaths, taking the toll beyond 388,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 30 more people lost their lives to the virus, while over 900 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.86 million lives and infected over 178 million people so far. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Iran's President-elect Ebrahim Raisi says the country's foreign policy will not be limited to the 2015 nuclear deal. Addressing his first news conference, Raisi said Iran's foreign policy priority would be improving ties with the Gulf Arab neighbors. He urged the U.S. to immediately return to the 2015 nuclear deal and lift all sanctions on Iran. Raisi said Washington had violated the deal and the European Union had failed to fulfill its commitments. He said the country's ballistic missile program is also not negotiable. Raisi is under U.S. sanctions over his alleged involvement in the extrajudicial killings of thousands of political prisoners in 1988. Prime Minister Imran Khan says he's against nuclear weapons, but Pakistan's nuclear program is only for the national defense. In an interview with HBO, Khan said the United States must ensure a political settlement before withdrawing from Afghanistan.
He also questioned the international community's silence on human rights violations in Indian-occupied Kashmir. He said Kashmir is an open prison with 800,000 Indian troops who have killed over 100,000 civilians so far. Regarding his advocacy for Islamophobia in the West, Khan said the 1.3 billion Muslim population was targeted after 9/11. Khan said the West coined the term Islamic terrorism after 9/11 as if it is religion that radicalizes people. He said there is no connection between Islam and terrorism. The Prime Minister added that there is a huge communication gap between the Islamic and Western world.
Moving on, Indian troops have martyred 3 civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Baramulla district. The youths were targeted during a so-called search operation in Sopore town of the district. The operation was ongoing till the last reports came in. The occupying troops have martyred nearly 370 Kashmiris since the revocation of the valley's special status in 2019. Hurriyat organization and leaders have expressed concern over the Indian troops' killing spree and paid tribute to the martyrs. In Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, leaders say they will urge Prime Minister Narendra Modi to restore the valley's status when they meet him on Thursday. The two sides will come across for the first talks since New Delhi revoked the region's special status in 2019. People's Democratic Party leader Mehbooba Mufti says their agenda is the restoration of Kashmir's statehood. APDP's spokesman said the alliance formed last year will discuss the upcoming talks with Modi in a meeting today. Senior leaders of the National Conference also met over the weekend and backed the decision. Meanwhile, India's Congress leader Chidambaram has urged the Modi regime to restore the full statehood of Kashmir. He called on the centre to resolve the issue politically. Pakistan says it will continue to play a constructive role to make the Afghan peace process successful. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said peace in Afghanistan is a priority of regional states. The Foreign Minister said the world acknowledges Islamabad's role in international peace and stability. Qureshi said he presented Pakistan's position on the Afghan issue at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. He said the Kashmiris have rejected the illegal Indian revocation of the valley's status. The foreign minister added that Pakistan has effectively highlighted the Kashmir issue at all forums. The Afghan government says its forces have retaken Bangi and Khaja Garh districts in Takhar province from the Taliban. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the Taliban suffered heavy casualties and fled the districts.
The ministry said Abdal and Karapacho villages in the province's Talukan city were also cleared. Early Afghan forces said they regained control of Faryab's Pashtun Kot and Dahan Dara districts. They claim to have killed 42 Taliban fighters during operations in Balkh and Faryab provinces. Reportedly, the centers of 11 districts in the province have fallen to the Taliban as they advance towards Maimana city. Meanwhile, the Taliban claim to have captured the Daulatabad and Shulgara districts in the northern Balkh province.
At least 21 Palestinians have been injured after Israeli forces attacked an anti-settlement rally in occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Red Crescent says the occupying troops fired tear gas to disperse the protesters in a blue city. It added that 12 protesters were hit by tear gas shells while 8 others sustained fractures. Moreover, Israeli forces also detained 15 Palestinians from various parts of the West Bank. It comes a day after the Israeli forces attacked Palestinian families in the Sheikh Jarrah of occupied East Jerusalem. Tensions have risen since Israeli court ruled the eviction of Palestinians from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah in favor of Jewish settlers. Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven has been ousted after the parliament passed a no-confidence motion against him. Löfven has been given a week to either resign and let the Speaker of the Parliament find a new government or call a snap election. The Prime Minister faced the motion against one of his proposals to the rent reform policy to ease immigration rules in the country. Löfven failed to secure the support in the parliament over a plan to ease rent controls for the newly built apartments. He has become the first Swedish head of the government to be defeated in a vote of no confidence. A new government or a caretaker regime would only sit until a general election scheduled for September next year. In Armenia, acting Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's civil contract party has won the parliamentary elections. Preliminary results show the ruling party received 53.92% of the vote from all the 2008 polling stations. The Central Election Commission says the Armenia alliance comes second with 21.04%. Meanwhile, I Have the Honor party is third with 5.23% of the vote. Russian media reported the nationwide turnout at 49.4%. Pashinyan called snap elections after a notorious defeat against Azerbaijan in the Nagorno-Karabakh war. The United States says it is preparing a new set of sanctions against Russia over the poisoning of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. In an interview, U.S. Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said European allies are being rallied to sanction Russia for using chemicals against its own citizens. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said the U.S. always likes to create obstacles. She added, the U.S. is trying to solve the problems of its own non-competitiveness. The US and the European Union have already imposed sanctions over the alleged poisoning back in March. The latest warning comes just days after US President Joe Biden met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Geneva. The US and the EU have imposed curbs on a number of Belarusian individuals and entities over human rights abuses and the forced landing of an airliner last month. Those designated are subject to an assets freeze, while EU citizens and companies are forbidden from making funds available to those listed. Speaking to the media, Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said the sanctions are designed to hit sectors of the Belarusian economy. Meanwhile, Britain and Canada have also sanctioned several Belarusian officials and entities as part of a coordinated move with its allies. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko sparked an international outrage over the forced landing of the Ryanair flight and brutal crackdown on the protesters last year. The United States says it is looking forward to a positive response on talks from North Korea. This comes after Pyongyang said it needs to be ready for both dialogue and confrontation with Washington.
U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, met her South Korean and Japanese counterparts in Seoul. After the talks, Kim said Washington will also be prepared for either dialogue or confrontation. He said the U.S. will continue to enforce UN Security Council resolutions that impose sanctions on Pyongyang. The envoy reaffirmed the shared commitment to denuclearize the Korean peninsula through diplomacy. Meanwhile, the White House termed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's remarks an interesting signal. In an interview, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Washington is still waiting for a direct response from Pyongyang on talks.
The Saudi Arabia-led military coalition says downsizing of the U.S. military assets in the kingdom will not affect its defense capabilities. In a press briefing, coalition spokesperson Brigadier General Turki al-Maliki said Saudi Arabia has the capability to defend itself. Maliki said they have a strong understanding with their allies about the threat in the region to counter them. Earlier, the U.S. said it was cutting the number of troops and air defense units deployed to the Middle East. These include Patriot batteries and an anti-missile system THAAD deployed in Saudi Arabia. Qatar's foreign minister has received Saudi Arabia's new ambassador to Doha, Prince Mansour bin Khalid Al Saud. He is the first envoy to be reinstated by the Arab states that had agreed to end a row with Qatar earlier this year. State media said Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani assured the Saudi ambassador of full support to advance the bilateral ties. In January, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt and Bahrain had agreed to end a 4-year boycott and restore relations with Doha. Riyadh, however, has taken the lead among the four in re-establishing relations. Myanmar's junta leader has arrived in Moscow to attend a security conference. This is General Min Aung Hlaing's second trip abroad since seizing power in February. The Moscow Conference on International Security is scheduled to be held from June the 22nd to 24th. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has appealed to Myanmar's military to allow aid for the internally displaced people. He backed the bishop's appeal to authorities to respect the religious sites as neutral places for refuge. However, the anti-coup protesters have yet again taken to the streets across the country. According to a rights group, the junta has killed at least 871 people since it seized power on 1st of February. Sri Lanka's military has launched an investigation on the humiliation of Muslims. The armed soldiers reportedly ordered the civilians to kneel on the streets as a punishment for flouting lockdown rules. In a statement, Army said the officer in charge has been removed and the involved soldiers ordered to leave the Erevar town. It added, strictest disciplinary action will be adopted against all errant army personnel. Residents termed the order degrading and humiliating. Meanwhile, officials acknowledged the troops had no power to decide such punishments. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. India has reported over 53,000 new COVID-19 cases with more than 1,400 deaths, taking the toll beyond 388,000. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.86 million lives and infected over 178 million people so far. More in this report.
Brazil has recorded over 1,000 deaths from coronavirus and more than 44,000 infections overnight. The country has registered nearly 18 million cases since the pandemic began, with over 501,000 deaths. Indonesia will tighten mobility restrictions in some areas for 2 weeks, starting from Tuesday after a rise in cases. In Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has promised more vaccines for the southwestern New South Wales state, which is fighting to contain its latest outbreak of the highly infectious Delta variant. The country's most populous city, Sydney, is on alert as a cluster in its suburbs grows to 9 cases. Over half the new cases being reported in Portugal's Lisbon region are also of the more infectious Delta variant. Meanwhile, the US has extended a non-essential travel ban to neighboring Canada and Mexico until 21st of July.
In Pakistan, deaths from COVID-19 have surpassed 22,000, with 30 more fatalities overnight. The health ministry says more than 900 people tested positive in the past 24 hours. The country has reported over 949,000 cases and more than 893,000 recoveries so far. The active number of cases stands at 34,000 with a positivity rate of 2.6%. Pakistan is reporting a steady decline in coronavirus cases after a deadly third wave. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Imran Khan says partial lockdown coupled with comprehensive data analysis helped Pakistan contain the virus. Pakistan has strongly condemned the Houthis' attacks on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In a statement, a Foreign Office spokesperson called for the immediate cessation of such incidents. Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said these attacks harm civilians and violate Riyadh's territorial integrity. He lauded the coalition forces for successfully intercepting the explosive-laden drones and destroying them. Moreover, the spokesperson reaffirmed Pakistan's support for Saudi Arabia against any security threat. Ethiopians are voting in national and regional polls in what the government calls the first free elections. About 37 million people are eligible to vote to pick 547 deputies for the federal parliament. The ruling Prosperity Coalition, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is the main contender for victory among 46 parties. The government is billing the elections as proof of Abiy's commitment to democracy after decades of authoritative rule. The Prime Minister earlier held a meeting of the National Strategic Command in Addis Ababa to ensure secure polls. Abiy vows to revive Ethiopia's economy hit by conflicts and the COVID-19 pandemic. The UN Human Rights Chief says she is deeply disturbed by reports of continued violations in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Addressing the Human Rights Council in Geneva, Michelle Bachelet said the abuses have been committed by all sides in the conflict. She added that there were credible reports that Eritrean soldiers were in the region despite a promise to leave. Bachelet said there are also reports of executions of civilians and forced displacement in Tigray. She hoped that a joint investigation with the state-run Ethiopian Human Rights Commission will conclude in August. Thousands have been killed since conflict erupted in Tigray last year, resulting in one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has confirmed plans to pardon Catalan separatists this week. The pardons will be sent to the cabinet on Tuesday. 9 leaders were jailed for sedition over a failed independence attempt in 2017. Another 3 were found guilty of disobedience but not jailed. Tens of thousands of people protested against the plans earlier this month, but the government say the move will help calm tensions over Catalonia. Almost 4 years ago, the semi-autonomous region's drive for independence plunged Spain into its biggest political crisis in 40 years. Opponents, however, have accused the Spanish government of using the plans to gain political support. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Another business updates. The U.S. stocks have climbed back as the market attempted to recover some of the losses caused by the Federal Reserve's policy shift. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite traded nearly 0.5% higher at open. The Dow Jones Index also opened more than 1.5% higher. The S&P 500 landed in the green territory, trading more than 1% up at open. Meanwhile, oil prices rose on rising demand in the Northern Hemisphere's summer driving season. China has broadened a crackdown on its massive cryptocurrency mining industry with a ban on mines in the key Sichuan province. As a result of the Chinese crackdown, the values of the major cryptocurrencies fell significantly. Authorities in Sichuan ordered the closure of 26 mines last week and stopped supplying electricity to all. Bitcoin fell below $32,300 for the first time since 8th of June. Smaller rival Ether dropped below $2,000 for the first time since 23rd of May, before trading 10% lower. China accounts for more than 50% of the global Bitcoin production and 80% of the global trade. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.